I'm your host, Scott Dr. Jigs Goldfine, welcoming you to another edition of Where'd You Get Your Funk From? For this episode, I'm pleased to welcome keyboardist and composer John F. Adams. Since the late 1970s to present day, in both the studio and on the stage, he's worked with an impressive list of funk, soul, and hip hop artists. They include BT Express, Keith Sweat, Amy Winehouse, Nas, Anthony Hamilton, De La Soul, Taylor Dayne, and James J.T. Taylor. He also served as musical director for the house band on TV's Showtime in Harlem. John, thank you for being here. How's everything?
My pleasure. Glad to be here. I love breathing. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And where are you, John?
I'm in Harlem, New York, Central Harlem. Well,
Oh,
right. Yep. Here with my wife. This is my wife and I are here at this apartment where she when she was born, she's been here 73, almost 74 years.
wow. So you're just a stone's throw from the Apollo.
Yeah. So yeah, 125th Street. That's right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. Although
Nice.
I'm originally from the Bronx.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
My parents are from Brooklyn, Coney Island, so that's where my
Oh,
roots are too.
all right. All right.
Yeah. So thank you for doing the show. I appreciate it. Been looking forward to talking to you. I know we pushed it back a little bit, but we're making it happen.
Yeah. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So, John, the opening question for the show is always the title, which is where'd you get your funk from? And there's two parts to that. One
Hmm.
is, where'd you get it from in terms of, your early, very beginning musical background, how you sort of got a feel for rhythmic music. And then the
Right.
second part of it is, how that background kind of shaped you into, who you are just in general.
Okay. Well, uh, while I started playing piano, there was a piano in the house, a gift, and my mother noticed that I hadn't. I was at the piano, I didn't just bang at the piano. I was doing something that seemed different. So she had my cousin, who's 10 years older than me, start me off at 6. And when I went to elementary school later on, there was a teacher that uh, came after school. I was bused to school, by the way, from the projects in the North Bronx, Edenwald projects, and even though there was a school 5 minutes away, I could have walked there, but because of segregation, they changed that. So I ended up having a teacher, Mrs. Vosk, and she saw that I had some talent, and she taught me till I was from about 8 till about 12. So when I was 12, was 64, I started buying records. And I went to Fordham Road in the Bronx and bought This Old Heart of Mine by the Isley Brothers, and Same Old Song, by the Four Tops, and later Helpless by Kim Weston. So I started doing that and learning to play what I was hearing. Especially, I remember I bought a Function at the Junction by Shorty Long. And boom, boom, boo, boo, doo, boo, boom, boo, doo, doo. So I was doing that while I was buying records. And in junior high school, uh, there was a there was a band of my contemporaries called the Golden Souls, and another gentleman named Gordon Jones who was playing. And I said, "Wow, that's really great." He played in the auditorium, and the Golden Souls were uh, a set of brothers that also had the Payne brothers, a bass player, I mean, excuse me, a drummer, keyboard player, and a guitar player who had a band. And then there was a youth organization that we were both part of called the Youth Leadership Foundation, where some elders did some things that exposed us to uh, what would be good for our broadening of our horizons. We had so when that organization came together, my partners and from Edenwald Projects, we put together a band called the Black Crusaders because we like the Crusaders. And so it was a large, band with mostly friends. So we started to practice at each other's houses. I would go to other people's houses to practice on acoustic piano, and there was a piano at the Leadership Foundation in the Bronx, and we got together and played there. So I would say that our the things that we liked were those bands because they had horns. So there's like Sly, James Brown, and really importantly, Kool and the Gang. You know, well, in that period, like '67, when I first started playing in bands, I went '68. I went down when Kool and the Gang had their second record out. They had a song out called "Cool It," and I went down to Manhattan Center on 34th Street and saw them live, and that changed my life because I learned how to form a band and perform in such a way that there's unity in the presentation. Nobody's weak points or no weaknesses were shown. Everybody's strong points were accentuated. So that was the first. That was the first level of doing that. So I was with that band, the Black Crusaders. It was in that form up until like 1970.
So, was like Joe Sample a big influence, and who else on keyboards?
Well, yeah, there were a few. Um, at the YLF, there was another group called the Sidewinders, and the keyboard player was Phil Clendenin, who ended up going to Sam Ash and then going to Yamaha and creating a whole bunch of the keyboards that they had there. And he's the first one. He taught me how to play, Cantaloupe Island and go and Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage. And he also was the first one to have a Fender Rhodes piano. So because of that, and because we liked the Crusaders, I liked uh, Joe Sample, I liked Herbie Hancock, and I ended up liking we were following McCoy Tyner as well. Those three.
Mm-hmm. Man, it must have been something seeing Kool and the Gang back then. They were so forceful in their sound and everything back then, and being so raw and more jazz rooted.
Oh yes, very much so. First of all, there's two elements. The bass lines were important, but not complicated because most of the guys, even though they didn't read music, they had good enough ears to pick up the bass line. However, on top of that were those great guitar parts. You can't do any of that early stuff without playing those great guitar parts. And of course, uh, Ronald, Khalees, he's so important to the sound of that. First of all, he had a beautiful tenor sound, and he was influenced by Train and some of the other jazz guys, and you can hear that in how the arrangements, how the horns were arranged, and he was so elementary, excuse me, essential to the sound of that when you did a song, and he had a solo, you had to do part of his solo, the opening part of his solo, before you did your own solo. The Speedo horn players, and that was also for a lot of the classic funk and R&B tunes. If there was a solo in there, like if Maceo did a solo, you did his solo. That reminds me. I went to I went to the first time went to Yankee Stadium was to see James Brown, and he had open up the door, give it to myself, and when I heard that first two, three, four notes that Maceo plays in the solo, you gotta play them. You almost actually, and you gotta kind of play his solo in almost all the songs he does before you do your own solo. So that's how a lot of us picked up things and the horn players that were in the band.
Yeah, such a signature that those guys put on those
Hmm.
solos. Unbelievable. Um,
Mainly, and also mainly because they were the most they could be is three record 45s, 3 minute 45s. So and the radio play, so you had to hit them. You had to hit them right away.
so about how old were you, John, when you were in your first, would you say sort of real band, that was, opening for folks and things like that?
Well, I would say about 18, 19, because the band that was that was the Black Crusaders became Visions. Uh, Another longtime great friend of mine, Vincent Henry. I met him in 1970. Through his cousin, Bumpy Johnson, Robert Lee Johnson. We used to call him Bumpy. Was also from the projects, and we had a bass player, Stephen Gaines, and Bumpy was the drummer. So that was the crux of that, and we started playing around in the Bronx in the different clubs. The Bronx within the Monterey, uh, and some of the other ones downtown uh, for fashion shows or for or for things where they had a dance, and there were several. As a matter of fact, in the early '70s, a company called us to be part of a thing at the Savoy Ballroom on 149th Street, which is gone now, but that's where Ostos Community College is, and we were playing along with the Rhythm Makers, which is the band that became GQ with Raheem and Paul Service, who also was from my neighborhood in the Bronx. So, we would be double booked or something like that for different things, or black organizations like uh, fraternities or personal clubs would hire us. So, as a matter of fact, another thing there, the Club Baron, which is on 130 Second Street on Lenox Avenue. Right now, it's changed over. It's gone now, but we ended up opening for any day now. I will hear you say, "Really by my love, Chuck." I forgot the last name. Uh,
Chuck Jackson?
Chuck Jackson. Yeah, but Chuck Jackson. We ended up opening them up for him, and Lonnie Youngblood was his musical director at the time. So we ended up being the opening act for other larger acts in certain venues as well. So that's '70s, early '70s.
Was there a point, doing a show or a studio job where you were like, you know what, I think I can make a career out of this, or I can pursue this as my job kind of thing, or my profession, or what were your thoughts back then?
Well, yeah. See that this is also an interesting story. So by '70, I went to High School of Art and Design to be an architect, and I went to Cooper Union to study architecture. But I was still playing in the band, and I wasn't getting along with the way it was being taught, and plus you had to wait 5 or 6 years to even become an architect, and you would start at the bottom, drafting, back in those days, and then work your way up if when you got a job. So uh, I was still at City College, and I switched over to the music department with Ed Summerlin, who was the musical director at the time, and the student senate concert committee, they would hire different bands to to come and play. So we ended up being that band Visions ended up being hired to play in the ballroom, the Finley Ballroom, which is no longer there, and it was in the South Campus. And the other band, we were after the opening band, which was outdoors, the big band, which was Earth, Wind and Fire. Earth, Wind and Fire had just switched over from Warner Brothers to to Columbia, and came out with Power, that first record. And Ronnie Laws was in the band. They had got Andrew Woolfolk, and it was a smaller band. It wasn't two keyboards or anything. They were transitioning. So we at the while they had their crowd and everyone loved them, we were inside with after they played with a full uh, with a full ballroom of 500 people, and we played three of their songs, two of them from their from their Warner Brother albums, and we did Power as well. So I started to feel back then that this is what I could do, because anything I learned in music I could use in an hour, and I didn't need people didn't care whether I had a degree or not. They wanted to know, can I do what you need to hear? So I switched over to music, and in 75, 76, I graduated, with my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Music, Jazz composition and arranging.
And were you mostly early on playing just acoustic piano or electric piano or clavinet, or what were you playing?
In 72, I went and bought my first uh, Fender Rhodes piano, and then uh, a couple of years later, a year or so later, there was a group, a band, a company called uh, that had an instrument called the Cat Octave keyboard, which was their copy of the ARP Odyssey. And so that's basically what I would play. I would play this, the string part. I actually could play two notes, so I could play string parts or horn lines or that kind of thing. And I had that for a while before I branched out and got other keyboards later.
So, if you could pinpoint it, what would you say was sort of a big break? Whether it was touring with somebody or doing a recording.
Well, um, and I had a friend of mine that was in the band Visions, and Rick Robinson is from the Uptown neighborhood. He rented some space and created a uh, a rehearsal studio on 219th Street and White Plains Road. And he called me and said, "Oh man, this group, Ecstasy, Passion, and Pain, which is on Roulette Records, they're here rehearsing. They need a keyboard player." And I told him you could do it. So I came down, rehearsed with them. They had a female drummer. Their band leader was a percussionist, and they had just switched from their original lead singer to a new lead singer, and they had two horn players, bass and guitar. And so I ended up getting that gig. So so I consider that my professional career starts in summer of 1976 with that band. So I went touring with them, opening, and actually, since I was disco music, we ended up being live along with the DJ in the clubs in the tri-state area.
Hmm.
Oh, and we also went. Yeah, we also went. We went to the West Indies. As a matter of fact, I met one of my lifelong friends and mentors in that time. And that time we were in Antigua. There was Antigua jazz. I mean, music festival, and the Whispers were there. Yeah, the Whispers were there, and another band, the Phil Medley Orchestra, that was also on Roulette Records, and I met Van Gibbs playing guitar there. There's also BT Express was there, with Leslie Ming on drums, and the guy that became Kashif was on keyboard. So we were all in that area playing, live for that festival. And
And
so,
that was in Antigua, you said, but some of those guys are from your neighborhoods, right? Like,
oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I'm just first. I'm 1.5 generation Jamaican American. So my mother was born there and came here in 45, 46, and my father was born here, but both his parents were from Jamaica. They came here early enough that my grandfather was a World War I veteran, for the United States, and my father was a World War II veteran.
hmm.
You know.
Looking at your discography that I have here, it doesn't show that recording. Well, maybe it does in another spot, but as far as albums goes, it shows someone named Roy C. as a 1977, and then Aquarian Dream. Um, so were those also pretty close, in terms of what you're just talking about?
Early 80s. Yeah, early 80s. So once, so the good thing about music is that there's a lot of things are word of mouth. So if people uh, know know you from where you've been playing, they might suggest you, and you don't even know that that's what they did. That's what they did. You don't even know where that came from. So it was Roy C. and like you say, Aquarian Dream, um, the original keyboard player. He used to play with Pucho and the Latin Soul Brothers, but he ended up with that band, and then he was like uh, otherworldly dressing like that. He was almost like on keyboard. He was almost like a Prince guy, but on keyboards. Jacques Bervic was the keyboard player, and I took his place. I also did 1980. I did a couple of songs on the BT Express album as well. Once you
Yeah,
start, mm-hmm,
yeah. So were you on their hit Let's Dance or different tracks for BT?
what was it? It was two songs. Give Up the Funk, I think, was the name of the two. Was the name of the tune on that record. Because when a lot of us people who rehearsed, who had bands that were not recorded, also practiced in the same rehearsal studios as other people who were also recording artists. So on 30th Street, there were a few rehearsal studios, and people also rented space of their own. So Crown Heights Affair had a spot on 30th Street, and BT Express or other bands were rehearsed at Planet Sound or other places on that street, and other places or in that general area at that time.
Well, Give Up the Funk, Let's Dance. I mean, I remember when it was a hit and it was on the
Mm-hmm.
radio and in the clubs. And
Mm-hmm.
um, what was the first song, if you remember, that you were part of that you heard on a radio somewhere? Because, a lot of times that's something people like, wow, that's me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was one of them. That was one of them. Um, and right, so that's and there's a lot of overlap, too, because I met Van Gibbs, in '76, and we became friends. He also by '77. Oh, uh, also that Ecstasy, Passion, and Pain. They were based out of Queens, you know. So sometimes we rehearsed in Queens, and other people uh, heard me and knew about me in Queens. So uh, the band that was there was a band that was called Mother Night that came. Most of those guys came out of Queens, and the trumpet player Ron Taylor and the sax player Gene Gee, were recording on some of those records that were being recorded, but they never came out. But because of that, I got suggested to replace Denzel Miller, uh, who had moved on to something else, and right before that, Donald Blackman, who got accepted by Lenny White, and this is this is like the early like 80s, late it's like late 70s, and so I ended up completing that album. But at the same time, Van Gibbs was working with Harry Belafonte, and I ended up working uh, with Van on some tunes, and he had another connection, and that brought us to Monte Carlo. So I was in Monte Carlo for like a month and a half, and when we came back, he suggested me to be with Harry Belafonte in 1980. So we did all of Canada, Jamaica, and Cuba in 1980 when they had the immigrants were coming over, and I was this close to Fidel and got him to sign my dollar bill. We were there for 12 days, so we played. So that, and then we went overseas to Munich, to play as well. So that's 1980.
Wow. Touring the world with a legend right there.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've got recordings. I asked him, either I recorded it myself or I had a tape recorder, or I asked for the recording from the desk.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just looking at the list too in the late 70s there. I mean, these were acts that, if you weren't on their big hits, they were all folks that had pretty big hits.
That's right.
Tanya Gardner, she hit some on the,
Yeah, I'm on her first single.
okay.
Yeah, because of Van Gibbs, I'm on her first single.
Yeah, that's, I can hear that song in my head. Do you
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
the
yeah,
title?
yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up again.
Because it feels so neat.
No,
Heartbeat? Is it Heartbeat?
no, it's
No,
before
Heartbeat
Heartbeat.
came, oh,
Heartbeat.
before Heartbeat.
Yes, before Heartbeat. It's her very first single. I'm on that,
Okay.
and when it was a disco hit, and also in between that time, because I had met these folks in Queens, and replaced folks that on records or in bands that they revered and they thought I did well. I got suggested, to substitute for Denzel Miller on Your Arms Too Short to Box with God on Broadway, which uh, ran for a year, and I was assistant conductor, and I conducted 20 shows on Broadway.
Wow. You're
You know,
really broadening your horizons.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I had another friend, a friend who was in the orchestra, Louis Barberin. He's from the Barberin family. That's from New Orleans. He's a trombone player. His father was a trombone player. There was another. He has a cousin that's a trombone player, Barberin, from New Orleans. He suggested me to replace the keyboard player for the Wiz, so for the Second National Company. So I was the keyboard player for that for half a year in '79. So that's for that keyboard for that one. Um, we had horns, but not strings. The first company came into the town with a rhythm section, and they had horns and strings. But I had piano here, acoustic piano here. I had the Fender Rhodes stage. On top of that, I had the Korg, the mini Korg on top to play single lines, and I had the string ensemble to do string lines. So I was doing all of that.
That was getting your
For
Herbie Hancock on right there.
exactly for the Wiz.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the Wiz, for which I recorded, my stuff from the in the pit as well. So that was '79.
So John, as you were going through, from, the kind of jazz R&B background and some of
Mm-hmm.
the disco stuff and a little bit of funk, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're going into these stage productions and things. What are one or two, what was one of the projects that maybe you were most nervous about or uncomfortable about and you felt like, can I do this? And then you did it and you were like,
The Wiz, the Wiz, because it's huge. I mean, Arms Too Short to Box with God. Uh, I had more time to learn that, but it was more it was more music that sounded closer to music you hear on the radio, or and I learned a little bit. I learned some gospel uh, things in order to do that. But some of that came the gospel X part that came out of that. Some of that's in R&B anyway. But with the Wiz, this is a huge. It's a famous production. There was like 40 pieces of music, some of which were like 5 6 pages. So I didn't have enough. I had just enough time, time to practice as and learn that without but I had to do that on the spot. And what happened was the first day I did this show on my own, it was in San Antonio, Texas, and the crew who was used to dealing with the band who was off music or just needed one music stand, they only put one music stand up for me. And I had so when you have 5 pages, you kind of have to have 2 or 3 music stands to fold the pages out. So I had to change clothes after that because I sweated through that. I sweated through that. But it ended up being fine. And and learning all those famous songs, especially I mean, I would say this. Uh, I got such an appreciation for what it takes to really stage such a great production. People would come late to the show and miss the tornado, like it was a movie or something. Like they'll catch it later. And this is 1979. When you see that when you saw that and they had that uh, uh, staging and there's a woman at the top of the thing and they're spinning it around and the music is fantastic. And then also when you come out of the on track, which is in between, it's the beginning of the second act, and they bring in uh, the Wicked Witch. That's fantastic because they got several people pulling the rope and for like 2 3 minutes, and you don't know what they're doing, and then they finally pull her through. It was really something, really something.
were you able to feel, the audience reaction through any of that? And
Oh yes. All
yeah.
right. Uh, so I'm audience left, like I'm sitting now. The stage is here, maybe up this high, and I can see everything, and I'm that stage right from there all the way at the end, and the audience is right there because this is right here is where the pit is. So we were in the pit. And, Arms Too Short to Box with God, we were on stage and we had a scrim in front of us, but we could still feel them. But the audience was right there. As a matter of fact, I remember we did Wichita, Kansas, and we had a great engineer doing it. And on the break, on the halftime break, on the intermission, we were walking past a woman who was talking to their child. Who said, "It's very good, but but the music's recorded. That's a tape." I said, "Oh no, there's a band right there in the pit." She says, and she looked at me like like I don't know what I'm talking about. I said, "I'm the piano player in the pit," and she looked at me, and then she looked at her son, and said, "It's a recording, son." So that was really something, really something. Excuse me.
So while you were involved with those productions, did you have time, or did you manage to, do anything like maybe play out somewhere with somebody just to, kind of keep your chops and some of the other, types of music and things?
Oh yeah, I mean there were plenty of local groups that I ended up playing with in those days. As a matter of fact, there was there were different places. There was a place in the Bronx called the Webster Bowling Alley. That's on 168th Street and Webster Avenue, and it was a 24 lane uh, bowling alley, but in between was a restaurant and bar, and we would play there, and folks would play there. So uh, um, I never brought a band there, but I ended up substituting for this band called Thesis. The main player was Larry Robinson, who's still around, as a matter of fact, playing and writing. And he when he was in high school, he was or right after high school, he played organ for Al Green, you know, and the drummer was the original drummer for Sky, and the bass player Oman Hairston and Larry and John Cooksey, the drummer, who were from the St. Nicholas Projects, along with uh, Patrick Adams, who was the guitar player in their band called Sparks. And Patrick Adams, of course, became this great producer who
Mm-hmm.
just passed away recently. So the the roots of a lot of bands did this, and became people did all kind of different things, you know. So I play and around the and around, so this is 80, from 77 to 80, some early 80s. So around the corner from the Webster Bowling Alley, the guys that started hip hop in the Bronx were in another club mixing, doing mixtapes and doing things that were on the turntable, you know, uh, DJ Hollywood and other cats. They were right around the corner on 165th Street doing that. So that was a lot of stuff was going on at that time. A lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's some heavy hitters to be at a bowling alley
Hmm.
gig. It's incredible.
As a matter of fact, when Tom McConnell was the drummer with Sky, the original drummer who passed away. But there was a time when uh, Larry Robinson didn't play, and I took his place, and the Tom McConnell didn't play. So the drummer they added that took his place was was Yogi Horton. So Yogi Horton. So I got I have tapes of us playing with Yogi Horton, and the trumpet player George Ellington III was on trumpet. Vincent Henry was on saxophone, and you know uh, we had like I said the bass player from Oman Hairston, and Big Jimmy was on the guitar as well. So and that was I got to play with. That's how I first met Yogi Horton.
What kind of set lists was that band doing?
They were doing Al Green. They were doing um I would say they were also doing LTD, you know, uh um and so it's early 80s. And so uh some we used to do a 20-minute thing of I Want You by uh by Marvin Gaye, and some Grover, all those kind of things. So it was good. They could do anything they wanted because it wasn't for dancing. It was entertainment. And plus, I think we played a long time. It was like 4 sets, $50 a night, four
Mm.
nights a week. And then,
Wow.
of course there was also uh, um, the the Mark IV on St. Nicholas and 146th Street. You see, see the brownstone. It's in the step down ground floor apartment. Ground floor, where they had a great bar, A lot of bands play there. As a matter of fact, these are the bands that people came from wherever they're from, out of the city or in other countries. They were coming. So the band Kinky Fox, they're from the Bahamas. Kinky and his brother, the drummer and keyboard player, but the lead singer was Johnny Kemp. So that's how we met Johnny Kemp.
Mm.
And then we ended up. Then he left them, after they played at the Cellar restaurant on 95th Street in Columbus, and he opened him for himself. He did the show himself. So the band he used was. So in '81, I ended up being in the group Change as musical director, along with Mike Campbell, the guitar player, Timmy Allen, and the lead singer at the time was James Crab Robinson. So he did the second Change album, and it came out right before Luther did his first album. So when we did live touring, like we toured we opened for Rick James when Rick James had Street Songs out. So people thought he was Luther because no one knew what Luther looked like at that time, because we did Searching and Glow of Love, as well as the stuff that was on the second album, which had more Americans co-write, on that record. So that was a large group of 11. There was 11 of us. So two keyboard players, there's two keyboard players with that group, and Vincent Henry was on that as well, saxophone and guitar. Mike Campbell again, a bunch of different folks. As a matter of fact, it was on that tour. Early, Change. It was on that tour, one of those early tours that we went out and we opened. We were on a tour with two or three other groups, one of which was Star Pointia and then Atlantic Star. And by watching them, we learned they had been out more than us, so we learned how to move on stage. And by watching them, we were all friends. We competed for. It wasn't a rivalry. We just tried to get the best reaction from the audience from what we did at the time. So Rick Galway, who was our percussionist, ended up being in a relationship with Sharon Bryant from Atlantic Star, and they got married and they had two children. They're still friends, even though they're not married anymore. And because of that relationship, I ended up writing this title tune off of Sharon Bryant's solo record, only solo record.
In 89. 89.
Here I am. Yep. Because then we're still friends. So that's what I'm getting about. That's how these things work. It's, so I've been blessed with that. Also, again, if I don't know if you're jumping ahead for you, but because of Van Gibbs, that's how I ended up being with Amy Winehouse.
Yeah. So, if I could jump in, John,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk more about that. In the late 80s and early 90s, your recording career picked up again, at least in terms of the credits I see.
Mm-hmm.
You were more in the studio again.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I have to ask you, though, since you mentioned it, did you see anything interesting with Rick James? Did you meet Rick James?
Of course. Rick James. All these bands were huge. I mean, we had 11 people with Change. There was a small band like DJ and thing with some. We would open. Excuse me. We would open, and then Rick would come out, and then in the middle of Rick's show, Tina Marie would come out. So, and then he'd come almost to finish the show, and so we learned a little bit about how to party hardy a little bit on the road, safely, but you know, we saw how heavy they partied, but the band was always, Rick James's band was always killing, always, always killing, you know, and also we also found out that we could hold our own with other funk bands. So uh, later in the tour, they did the South, and we ended up being the opening act, and then Cameo was the middle act. And sometimes, sometimes bands fight each other or try to jock each other for space on stage, and and uh, and also sometimes they try to psych you out by they're not talking to you. We're gonna do the show, or we don't speak to anybody until we do the show. So Cameo was kind of like that. So when we were on the thing with Rick James, he would Cameo would try to get as much space in front of. So we had as little problem. We got three women, you know, and a guy dancing and two keyboards and all that kind of stuff. So we would have to fight for that. So what happened was there was a concert in Milwaukee that didn't include Rick James, and everybody had to rent stuff, over there. So when we got there, oh, and by the way, whenever anyone else was playing, uh, Cameo's folks, they weren't allowed to come out and see the audience, or be seen. They just made their presentation. At least that was happening then. And so we're in Milwaukee for the 20,000 people outdoors, and we're setting up. And their setup is the opposite of ours, and you know, I told her, I saw that, and I said to my crew, well, put the bass amp where so and so. Well, Cameo's amp, people said that we can't move it. I said, yo, you don't work for them, you work for us. And when it's time to switch over, they'll switch it to where they got to switch it. So we got that together. And when we started playing, we had a great engineer, and Timmy Allen on bass, Mike Campbell on guitar, uh, Vincent Henry on guitar. They had long cables, so this was on a hill with like 10, 20 feet of grass before it even hit the ground. They came out and and scooted down on the thing and started playing right in front of the audience, because we weren't that close to the audience. But the 20, but they got closer, and it got so much attention that Cameo came out of the dressing room to see what was going on. So that was a you know a marking of at least we got them interested enough to see what we were doing. They got that attention. You know.
I think I've heard things like that about Cameo.
Hmm.
I've heard the opposite of like the Bar Caves. I heard they were really cool to do shows. I
Yeah.
don't know if you did anything with them.
Yes. Yes. We offered. Yeah. In '86, going to '87, I was with Glenn Jones, and they were the headliner. They were the headliners, and it was us. We opened, and then um, the group from Staten Island. They were in the middle, and Levert. So it's four acts, and we were just fine. We were just fine. Also, some of the friendliest guys in the world is Earth, Wind, and Fire. I either played with them or or did work with or opposite them a bunch of times. There was an occasion when I was the house sound engineer for different things, and so you could we would go and they would come out and cheer us on at the side of the stage, or we could go into their dressing room and say hey and what's up. So they were great. They're great. They're great. You know.
Did you ever encounter people like Parliament Funkadelic or Bootsy or any of those like really hardcore funk bands?
I went to see them. I went to see them, at Radio City, but the bands I was with didn't fit that, that kind of lineup. We weren't on the same thing with that. But I did want to go to see them on several occasions.
What about I'm just thinking of, that period, like a Stevie Wonder, or I
Oh,
imagine you
oh, I
must have
got a
looked
good.
up to him as a keyboard player too, I would think.
Oh, as everything, with
Yeah.
everything. I mean, so I have a Stevie Wonder story. So I'm with J.T. Taylor from Kool and the Gang. I was with him from uh, 1999. You know, um, with Artie Reynolds was the musical director at the time, and I was also with Kenny Seymour, the second keyboard player, and others, and we had other people rotated. But we uh, later on when I became a musical director, we had to do this thing in the south of France, uh, and this guy was 40 years old and he's a billionaire. So we're playing for his 40th birthday. So we go to the venue, and one neighbor is one of the Rothschilds, and the other neighbor is Bono. And so when we walk in, it's like a 35, 40-foot stage with a square in the raised thing in the middle, and a piano and a bass, and then behind it is a big square over the top, and they have like a four-piece band on top. And then we did our sound check and went back to the hotel. Well, turns out when we came back, we found out that from 8 to midnight, the four-piece band played, and when we walked in there, we were supposed to be playing, soon, but Stevie Wonder was on stage. So Stevie, and all these billionaires, like the guy from Virgin Airlines is there and whatnot, and so we're playing. He's playing. He played as long as he wanted to. So and we waited and played. Then we met him afterwards, you know, and then after we played because we had to do a quick turnaround. But we were on the same bill with him, and then another J.T. Taylor thing with someone uh, momentous was in England. We opened. We were this guy, the guy who made all the um, all the wire hangers in the UK was rich, and he was wanted to do uh, a Venetian ball where you go with mask and costumes, but it didn't happen. And so he switched that around and said, "Okay, we're going to do another thing in this round venue in London." And so it's a completely round building, maybe 8 stories high, and halfway around there's a walk around in the thing. So when we walk around, when we get in there, we see the stage. It's set up like the jungle. There's like if I'm standing on the stage, when I look over there, I see trees that go up to the ceiling and a waterfall over here, and then 300, seating for 300 people. So we do our sound check, and we don't, there's artwork on the floor, but we don't know what that is. We do our sound check, and when we come back, Cirque du Soleil is performing and hanging from the ceiling. And then we do, and then when we do our show. It's well received, about an hour 15. And when we finish, we are walking past, and who do we walk past? We walk past Elton John. So Elton John performed by himself for about 45 minutes, just him on the piano. And then he brought out the London company of the Lion King to perform for this guy. So this guy had some money.
Wow. It's like your own Las Vegas for that person.
Yep, 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 yes, that's right. So I've been lucky. I've been lucky and blessed.
Did you ever get to meet any of those heroes you mentioned earlier, like Joe Sample or McCoy Tyner, or what was the other one you mentioned, Herbie?
Yes, Herbie. You know, I don't make a big deal about this. I was at the Herbie was at the Blue Note, and you know, I met him at the Blue Note and thanked him for for his work, and that he inspired me. And I don't want to fawn and hold him because it was in between shows. But I thanked him and I shook his hand and shook my hand back. And uh, Joe Sample, I met Joe Sample in St. Lucia because I was with J.T. Taylor and yeah, I was with J.T. in St. Lucia, and we did concerts there, and he was in St. Lucia, so I met him there as well. McCoy, I may have brushed past him, but not a heavy meeting, you know. Uh, um, uh, Patrice Rushen I met at the Blue Note, which I really love Patrice Rushen because she plays a behind off, but also, you know, she, I think that her, even though she came in a period where people thought her voice was small relative to Shaka and Aretha and Gladys and others, she's the one that created the space for Janet Jackson or some of these other three girl groups that had smaller voices but were melodic, you know. So when I had the opportunity to talk to her and tell her that I thought that when I met her at the Blue Note.
Hmm. I'm sure she appreciated that. She's very
Yes.
gracious from what I've
Oh,
seen.
very much so. Very
Yeah.
much so.
Um, so anyway, thank you for sharing those stories, John. Um, in the early 90s, you worked with people like Keith Sweat, um, and as you mentioned, Sharon Bryant.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I'm Keith Sweat's first musical director.
okay,
Yeah.
were you on his some of his hits?
I'm on the first one album. That's all Teddy Riley. But so we had to redo that. So, but at the time, and we did that with two keyboard players, actually three. It was me and Bobby Douglas, and who was with Platinum Hook, and also Alex Bugnon was with us in the beginning, and then the second album I'm on about the band is on like 4 or 5 tunes as well. I'm the soloist. I did the synth solo on Merry Go Round, and then the third album after that, I co-wrote a song with him. You know, but when we went out the second time for the second album, I was able to get uh, two Macs on the road. You know, to one to back up the other to cover some of the extra parts that they did in the record that even two keyboard players couldn't do. And do the background. So that tour, the Triple Threat Tour in '91, Johnny Gill opened up, we were in the middle, and Belle Biv DeVoe followed us, and all of us had some tracks or something like that. But outside of Earth, Wind, and Fire, nobody had two Macs running running key stuff out like that, like how we had it, and because of that, that's how I ended up putting together uh, Taylor Dayne's band and put Bobby Douglas in there. So we had the computer as well for that because she asked for that, and he's
So
been with them since '93.
were you comfortable adapting to the technology that was coming in during your time? Because what a transformation from when you started to getting in the 90s and into the 2000s.
Well, very much so. I mean, part of it is that also, I did sound for several different instances, like when so even though I don't practice on these big digital boards, I know I learned a lot, from being in the cellar. I did sound for groups that were in the cellar and regular analog board, and I did stuff for Orange Juice Jones on the road, and I had lessons, quick lessons by a great fellow named Rick Camp, who's from Ohio, but he does uh, you know Beyonce, and he did Destiny's Child and a whole bunch of other people, and I learned from him how to do that. So so because of that, well, when it came time to do to do stuff with the computer, um, I tried to make sure that there wasn't too much of the computer on stage, but the band could hear themselves properly. And the house engineer did what was in the computer that did that layers. Also, if you have background vocals that you're using for that comes from the computer, but you have three singers. To me, I would tell them put the singers on top of the background vocals that comes there because then you hear more nuance from the real singers, even though they're saying the same notes. And um, I try to listen to, or we try to listen to the real drummer. Let the drummer hear just about what he needs to hear and not too loud on stage. And uh, and then the rest of us plays the drummer like we would any place else. So the adjustment was deciding, depending on how many people you had to play, keyboard parts or whatever parts, what parts to play and what parts to cover. So um, change and all these other things that I did, I learned to how to orchestrate, do that because that's also part of what I did with when I went to school, I did orchestration. So and how to try to make that happen. So and there were instances like with J.T. Taylor where we started with two keyboard players, but then it shrunk down to one. So I had to cover enough of the parts so that you hear the essence of what is. Plus, I had to conduct music lyric and sing. So you know, you learn to cover what you got to cover.
You got to be nimble and adaptable and open-minded,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and creative, you know? Um, so with the New Jack Swing thing, was that anything that you had to kind of, took a minute for you to latch onto, or, how was it different, you know, producing and doing that compared to, what you had done before?
Well, the thing doing that is that Teddy comes from bands. Anyway, I've known Teddy since before he did that. Uh, and he's from St. Nicholas Project as well. But but the thing that was different about that is maybe uh, the drum parts, the sounds of the drums. So what happened there is that the sound of the record is the sound of the drum samples as opposed to what a real drum would be sounding like. So so you kind of had to play along with that and play inside of what the drum programming was, you know, and he was brilliant at that and is brilliant at that. And sometimes the hi hat part, which was not or something that you couldn't play that and play. You couldn't play that hi hat part and play the other parts of the drum, but it was still part of the record. So you have to let that go. You have to not. You have to. You have to uh, live. You have to do that. Okay, that's programmed. I'm doing that, and then I can do other stuff to fit around that to make that happen. To make that musical. So, and that's basically what the issue is nowadays. Yeah, I think with live stuff, a lot of the things don't sound are mixed in a way that doesn't sound like what a live band would sound like. So when you perform it, you need to sound like the record.
Mm.
So which is why there's so much track with things, except for bands that play stuff that sounds like a band but has extra parts.
Yeah, I felt like the rhythms of New Jack were just innovative on the funk,
Oh yes,
Really,
very
yeah,
much so.
yeah.
Yeah, triplet feel, triplet feel, and also uh, it's funny how earlier pop music took a thing from by getting by getting gospel vocalists to do stuff to put different inflections in, like Aretha and Dion and then Shaka went into another place, and then you have Whitney, and then and then after a while, that affects what can be played in church, and the church guys do all kind of different things that come back in on top of that, which is part of also what I heard in some of the New Jack swing things, uh, not necessarily from from Teddy, but from others as well. You hear the church changes, and the church guys did stuff that went off of that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then so much funk, went back to the church too. It's like a two-way street in that way.
yeah, very much so, very much so.
You ever encounter Shaka?
Yeah, uh, when I was with the Hush Productions in the '80s, from '82, I left Phyllis Hyman and went to Hush Productions to be with Melba Moore. I started off, being the second keyboard player, and then the first keyboard player left, and I became musical director. And at the same time, Lilo Thomas came out with his first album, and Freddie Jackson came out with his first album. So I was their first musical directors, all from '82 to '85. And so you asked me about
Your
the
encounter with
Shaka.
Shaka Khan. Yeah.
So with Lilo, we did a thing at Lilo at Lehman College in the Bronx, and we ended up opening for Shaka actually, and a lot of my friends actually, Mike Campbell, Bobby Douglas played with her later, but at this particular time, Najee and his brother Farid Abdul Haq and uh, let me see, Melissa Morgan and and Lizette Wilson, who was the musical director, who are also friends. Uh, they were with Shaka, and it's hard to get to Lehman College in the Bronx. It's on the west side, what part of the Bronx, and we didn't have GPS, and they were late. And Poogie Bell was the drummer for them, and they wanted to know if they could go on time. And by this time, a lot of this stuff I've been playing already in the cellar and all that kind of stuff with different acts. And Poogie said, Poogie said to Shaka, "Well, look, John Adams could play some of the stuff until the time gets there." And so Shaka pulled me over and said, "So John, I understand that you play keyboards and some of my songs." Yes, I with quite a few of them. Well, if when you play, if I ask you to play, what I want you to do is mainly, lay out. you know, she said, yeah. So that was the first time I met her, and then other times, I run across her, backstage and in other situations. I've been really lucky. I mean, Rach, because of that group, to switch back, because of that group, the YLF. Uh, that's how I met Ray Chu. I've known Ray Chu since he was 10, and when he did Showtime at the Apollo, he asked me to be part of that, but I couldn't. I didn't do that because at the same time I was going to be on the radio with Vaughn Harper or BLS live out of this club called Sweetwaters. So I was going to be musical director for that. So I did that, but he didn't hold out against me, and I'm eternally grateful to him and his wife for when they include me in things. So I ended up substituting for him or Bobby Douglas at the Apollo for for live stuff, for the live amateur night or for other things. So that's how I ended up doing Showtime in Harlem, was he suggested me for that.
I'm just amazed by the diverse, career you've had. I mean, what an
Yeah.
interesting path you've taken, John. Um, so, how did you first connect with Amy Winehouse?
Well, this is let's see, 2001. So um, Salam Remy is Van Gibbs' son, and Van Gibbs is my friend and my a mentor and like an older brother to me. So after we done, you know, he got me on. I did records with him, and I did uh, Belafonte, and I also went to Monte Carlo, with Vivian Reed because of him, and came back. He got these other connections, and I don't know exactly how he met Amy, or how Salam and he met Amy, but when she did her first record, Frank, that didn't uh, release in the United States, I did about 7 or 8 tunes on that, you know, along with some other friends of mine, Vincent Henry again and Bruce Purse, and so we did that at Salam Remy's studio in Miami, and then when the second album came out, that's the most famous. I'm on about 4 of those. Then he called me back to do that. I did it at the same studio: electric piano, organ, clav, some string stuff, and also because of Salam Remy, I'm on some Nas records. You know, one of them with Amy. You know, Cherry Wine is Amy and him, and she was really a great people. It's a shame. She was very gifted. That's her natural voice. She wasn't trying to sound, imitate anybody. That's her natural thing. And so, yeah, she wrote things on the guitar. So very often, Salam would record her doing her scratch vocal with her on guitar, and sometimes he'd keep it, and sometimes he wouldn't. And then I'd put the other stuff on. You know. So
Were you surprised when she, blew up like she did in popularity?
not because she blew up, but how big. Not because, but how big. So that's 2001 when the first record came out, and then and after she passed in 2011, I'm on Lioness as well, 5 or 6 songs. And I'm grateful for Salam seeing that I could add something to that, and also at the same time that I did that record, I did Back to Love for Anthony Hamilton, which he did that for her too. So it's it's as long as I can do what people hear, fits what they do, and and uh, I'm an easy guy to get along with, and I do what people ask, and you know, and try not to try not to annoy anybody. I guess people will find a way to to include me on something if they think it fits, as well as me trying to get some things out of my own, when I can.
Was there anything that stands out, where you're in the studio that just took a long time to get down right? Like, oh man, we're doing another take.
Well, not too much. Um, um, you know, having started with 24-inch tape and then having to do drop-ins off of a 1/4 inch or 2 inch tape to drop in. I learned about those parts, and also most of the people I work with who call me, they're even though we're on computer, they're economical. If I can, sometimes you can record, the practice thing that you go through, but that means you got to do a lot of cleanup of this hard drive. So what I do and what a lot of folks do, they let you go through it a few times. I have to believe I'm ready, and you do that, and then you do a couple of versions that are locked in where you've started to really lock in, and then they can cut and paste different pieces, and then sometimes you do the whole thing, the whole thing through, or I've been sent tracks and done a bunch of different things that I hear, and Salam will use what he hears and keep what he does, what doesn't fit, but leaves it me to people left it to me to put what I hear and what they fit, and I send them the export, the tracks.
Are there one or two people that maybe stand out from, your whole career that just you worked with them and they were just like on a different level? Like this cat is, in a where they're, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Salam Remy is he's a brilliant producer. The stuff he hears and how he gets you to do what he wants is really phenomenal. Um, I want to also, as another mentor, I want to mention Richard Cummings, who for 20 odd years was the musical director for Hallie Belafonte, and um, that was that was the that was the first situation where I worked with a second keyboard player and had to do the other parts. And sometimes we would switch positions and all that. But also, so for him, what he hears and how to put together a world class uh, uh, music, artist as Harry Belafonte, that has stuff all across different genres, and 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 what detail you have to do. I have to really thank him for what I learned. Without him, he didn't have to beat me in the head just listening and doing what he did, what was necessary to do. I learned how to really support a world class artist. So the next year when I had to do change and these other things, I remembered that and as an example, you know, really amazing cats.
Hmm. What would you say you're most proud of accomplishing through all that musically?
I feel proud about being able across different genres to um to provide the sound, the textures on different instruments that people kept on record. That's whether it's a famous record or not, or it's still out there, uh, in history to be listened to. And in the same way that like especially with this with the Amy Winehouse stuff, for instance, when I have to be a musical director for something and someone hands me their record and done by other keyboard players, and I have to copy that and get that essence of that. I'm happy that I'm on some of those things that other people had to do. Start with what I played in order to do the record right, you know, or or I set the example, uh, for the what the way the band sounded like. That the artist who I did that for says, you know, you know, listen to this tape of what the band was in '91 or in '90 so and so, or where John Adams was the musical director. It's got to sound. It's got to come from there. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that. I could see that for sure. As you know, in your career as an MD, uh, did you ever run into much friction with like guys being late or blowing their parts or I don't know.
Not much. I mean, guys like that don't stay because the artist doesn't want them. You know. The most friction I say I would have, without going into too much detail, is sometimes management of the artist. You know, in terms of what my worth is, and negotiating with them, uh, whether what they're asking me to do or what I've been doing requires, you know, a raise or some other consideration. You know, uh, and um, um, very often, um, management, they act as though if you, that they can treat you any way they want, because you don't want to lose the gig. But you know, when I accept when I accept the gig at whatever money, the money, you can't. I can't pay 50 to play $50 less, you know, than you know than I want. When you accept the gig, you play as best you can for whatever you accept. However, if other conditions aren't right or they're not treating you right, another thing, they need to step up to that. What I find is that very often other organizations, the higher ups in the organization, they have they have accountability for you, but not for themselves, to you for what they're responsible for. So to get back to what I was saying before, they sometimes they act as though you won't quit because you don't want to leave them, lose the money. But as long as I can still play, I believe as well as I play, I believe I have found another job. They didn't take my talent. I'm just not suited for that situation any longer, or not suited to take that job in the beginning. So I I've stood by those decisions, 99%, without having to go into detail with who.
What about, do you have a bucket list? Is there somebody out there that you're like, man, I would really love to collaborate with that person?
Well, uh, Herbie would be nice, because I mean, he has usually if he has a second keyboard player, it's usually great filling games. And as second keyboards, I think I have enough ear and chops to do what's necessary in that position. Um, there was a, there've been others. You know, Sting would be nice to do something with. I had the other friends play with Sting. You know, uh, um, and he's exciting. Um, you know, there's a and you know what I also like on TV. I think as I'm older, I'm in my early 70s. Going around on the road, if I could find a spot to be in, you know, like Fallon or Stephen Colbert. I really like I really like that band. That's a great band, Stephen Colbert. Plus, they mixed the best in TV to me.
Mm.
They mixed great. If something like that came along that I could be part of, that would be great.
That sounds right up your alley to me.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'd be great. I mean, the closest to that I have is GQ with Raheem. My gear is there. They have a crew. I set up and I go and I play, and I come home or take the or sent home by plane or whatever, and I could do that forever. You know, People want to know when I'm going to retire. Retire to what? Musicians don't retire. We play till we can't physically play or we stop breathing.
Yeah. It's the truth. I mean, why would you, right? I mean,
Hmm.
um, yeah. So you're playing out with GQ sometimes. Tell the folks what else you're kind of up to nowadays.
Well, I'm doing. I have a gig coming up on the 14th. I'm playing for this gentleman, the Reverend Lewis. Uh, he's and Lewis Anderson, and he's doing a whole bunch of Luther stuff. So that's challenging because I started out having two keyboard players, and one dropped out. So now I have to try to cover two keyboard parts, and a sax player who plays EWI is going to cover those things. Then there's from time to time, I'm able to put together a group for different things. I call it the Adam Syndicate, 5-piece group. Sax player, vocalist, L.A. Blacksmith, who was with uh, Fatback Band. I mean, Crown Heights, excuse me. He's with Crown Heights. Uh, Camille Gaynor Jones on drums. Billy Grant on bass, who's great vocalist, and uh, Glenn Gibson Sr. You know, the five of us, we can cover a lot with those things. So I've done that for for several things uh, around the city, and the GQ thing is like I say, that's we do that for 11.99, or we perform for the governor of New York, for the mayor, all kind of folks for different things. And also, I'm trying to write for some vocalists who have some momentum and try to get some things out. So I'm trying to do all of those things at the same time, as well as see if I can get something placed with a movie or in a commercial.
Yeah. So do you spend some time composing on your own?
Oh yes, very much so, very much so. See?
Yeah. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah, you know. So like I've got two setups. This one here, and because my wife is an artist as well, you know, she plays African drums and percussion and sings. She plays with a group called Women of the Calabash, which started almost 40 years ago. She's been with it half that time, and the original person, Yaya Daly Nelson, passed away, but they continue in her honor. Sometimes she has to have stuff here, so I have another computer in the bedroom, and I can write or do stuff there, so she can work here as well. So
Hmm.
there's that, and I also try to have backups for every keyboard that I have, so if something goes wrong, I can always have the sound that I need.
Yeah. So what's your when you're playing on your own, do you mostly stick to electric piano, or what's your kind of
Oh,
most?
when I'm playing on my own, it depends on the song because whatever the song has, I have that. I have I try to have the same kind of sounds across every keyboard that I have. This keyboard that I have right here, uh, is a I try to have it be a not only a controller but have some sounds on it and also be an audio interface. So I can connect the computer to this and play from main stage. I learned how to do main stage from uh, Kenny Seymour, the keyboard and musical director, and then I also have so I have an 88 version of this keyboard, and I have the Korg X50, which is the same one that the guy from Dirty Loops played when he first started. I have that. It has great sounds on it, and I have another smaller 49 key keyboard that has a bunch of sounds like the same, like the motif, so I can travel light, so I can save my back.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Uh,
know,
do you sing any background vocals or do
Backup. Oh, I sing lead and background vocals.
oh,
I've, you know, I what did I do? I'm not. I have. There's a gentleman. His name is Naj Nhojj. I co-produced his record. He's from Guyana. He's openly gay brother, and he did an album in 2013. Uh, uh, it's named after the Stevie Wonder tune. It'll come back to me, but I did. I co-produced a record that he did with two duos. He did with a guitar duo uh, and a keyboard duo, and then I produced a band thing where I did all the tracks on iPad and sent that in, uh, and then overdubbed the bass and drums, and then I sang background on some of those. You know, and I've done that for other people, well, on different instruments, on different kinds of setups. Sometimes I've even set up a person's rehearsal studio in their own house. I've done that in a couple of people's houses. Set up a studio so they can record, send me the tracks, and I come back there and then produce in their house, with a laptop.
I'm looking on your credits here on Discogs. They only have you doing vocals on Aquarian Dream.
Right. Well, this fellow, uh, um, Naj, his record, I'm doing background vocals on that, and um, I'm on background vocals with the trombone player, Clifton Anderson. Clifton Anderson is a world class trombone player and a friend. We were all in. I sang background vocals with T.S. Monk, so we were
Okay.
in T.S. Monk as well, and so that's so. But he does it. He's a jazz cat. He's Sonny Rollins' nephew. So he on a couple of his records I've sung background on that as well, or done lead guide vocals for him as well. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago he had a concert at St. Mark's Church. Him and his significant other, who's with the Fiery String Sisters, and I didn't play at all. I was his sound engineer in that. So I get around, do a few things.
So thank you so much for sharing all these stories, John, and thanks for all the great music you've contributed to bring so many people so much joy.
My pleasure. It feeds me as well. It feeds me as well. So blessings and thank you.